with short talks. And our first talk is about our pilot submissions to FDA. And we have two speakers, Ning, Leng, and Hsu Cho, who will be joining us for this talk. So please take it away.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I thought it would be hard to follow Ross talk, and then it came the Raphael sound, so it's so hard to follow all those wonderful presentations and sounds. Yeah, so today Hsu and myself will be presenting our pilot submission to FDA, and those are efforts on behalf of our consortium, our submission working group. Yeah, so myself is coming from Roche Genentech, and Hsu is representing CDER FDA. So in this presentation, I will start with the introduction of the working group and then the pilot submissions that we did and we planned for. And then he will give a deep dive to the pilot 1 submission we did earlier this year. So just want to start with a very brief background about a regular submission, just in case that anyone in the audience are not familiar with this. So basically, like to support a market approval of a treatment, sponsors are required to submit to health authority a comprehensive package of materials to evaluate the drug's efficacy and safety. Oftentimes, this include an analysis report, which could be a giant PDF file, and also include a data set and software programs. And in terms of reviewing these reports, the health authority reviewers, especially statistical reviewers, will look at the report and as well as try to reproduce the key analysis results using either independent programming or a review of the submitted data or code. As we all know, the proprietary software has been widely used so far. And as we are all here today, we know that in recent years, there are increasing interest in adopting the open source software. Therefore, a number of us from different companies and also from FDA came together trying to establish a working group under the nonprofit organization, our consortium. And the aim of the working group is really trying to test out the feasibility of doing submission using open source package, and also trying to identify challenges and gaps, and then try to run some pilots to test out workarounds to those challenges. So this is a very wide collaboration between FDA and a number of companies. So here I'm showing the companies who has been involved into our submission pilot 2, and I believe we even have a larger team right now when we move to submission number 2, the pilot number 2 and pilot number 3. And then when we established the working group, we thought about we try to scope out some challenges we want to tackle in our pilot number 1. And at that time, actually, we tackled 3 challenges. The first one is about reproducibility. And we all know that when working with open source language, sometimes getting to the same package version and handling the package dependency might not be that straightforward. Therefore, we want to run a pilot to show some examples on how to ensure reviewers have access to the same package versions. And then the other thing we identified is that how to submit a proprietary R package, namely the package that cannot be put on public domain. So basically for our package, which is in the public domain, the FDA staff can retrieve them from CRAN or GitHub or any public repository. But for the packages that cannot be put in the public domain, basically we need to submit the code through the FDA submission gateway. However, we encountered a technical issue there that because of security reasons, we couldn't submit any zipped file, compressed file, and also we couldn't submit a kind of complex subfolder structure to the FDA. Therefore, in this pilot, we try to use our package lite from Merck, trying to convert the proprietary R package into a TXT file to do the e-submission. And lastly, we all know that for regulatory submission, there is a very well-defined folder structure. So far, there are a number of examples on how to put certain SAS files into this folder structure, but we didn't find a good example about how to put relevant R files into this folder structure. So for pilot 1, we try to show an example on how to store certain files so that our reviewers can access to the information they need to. Of course, there are additional challenges we want to tackle down the road. So in addition to the 3 challenges we try to tackle in pilot 1, we are also planning to test out accessibility of novel tools such as Shiny or container. And also another thing people discuss a lot is about package and system validation. Although validation is not in the scope of our working group, there is a very nice working group called our validation hub, and there are a lot of good information in their webpage. So if you're interested, please feel free to check that out. And I think later today there will be also a talk talking about validation. And then I also want to give just an overview of the pilots that we did, and also the pilot that we're planning to do. So the pilot number 1 is about testing out a TLF submission using R code. So this one was finished earlier this year. Yeah, so in this submission, we used the similarity data from CDEX pilot, and we generated 4 TLFs using different R packages to cover like different use cases. And also we submitted a proprietary R package in this pilot. And Hisu will give a deep dive of this pilot submission and share her review experience for this submission. And we're currently working on pilot number 2, which will be a Shiny-based pilot submission to FDA CDER. So in this Shiny-based pilot submission, we'll try to test out the feasibility of submitting Shiny codes. And we're hoping that like the FDA staff can redeploy the Shiny app on their own local machine. And then this hopefully this submission can be done later this month or in December this year. Recently, we also kicked off pilot number 3, which will be a pilot 1 extension. As you may remember, in pilot 1, we only generated TLF using R, and in pilot 3, we will also generate ADAM data using R and submit those R codes for ADAM generation. And we're also scoping out our pilot 4, which will be testing out the container technology. So with that, I'll turn it to Hisu to give a deep dive to the pilot 1 submission.
Okay, thank you, Ning. My name is Heisi Cho. I'm a statistician at the FDA. So I reviewed the R Consortium's R-based pilot 1 submission today, and last year, and then this year, and then I'd like to share my review experience with you guys today. Next slide, please. So this is the standard disclaimer. So this presentation reflects the views of the author and should not be construed to represent the FDA's views or policies. Next slide, please. Ling, are you sharing your screen? Okay, awesome. So I like to start with the FDA statistical software clarifying statement. So FDA does not require use of any specific software for statistical analysis. And statistical software is not explicitly discussed in Title 21 of the Code of Federal Regulations. However, the computer software used for the data management and statistical analysis should be reliable, and documentation of appropriate software testing procedure should be available. So FDA submissions have been mainly based on SAS language, which is a proprietary software. But the point is, as long as a software is valid, reliable, and reproducible with proper documentation, it doesn't have to be a SAS-based submission. And that is currently happening right now. So next slide, please. So there has been many open source software projects in clinical trial, and I highlighted some of the benefits and challenges in using open source software, specifically R in this presentation. So the most commonly mentioned benefit of using R compared to SAS is cost savings. So anyone can install and use R without any need for a license or a fee, whereas a company needs to pay tons of money for proprietary software. Second is innovation. So adaptability to new trend is much faster with open source. Anyone can contribute to developing our packages, reviewing source code, and resolving any issues. So when you think about how to analyze real-world data sets, such as electronic health record or patients' recorded outcome, R might be a better option because it adapts more flexible and innovative methods to deal with this messy and unstructured data set. And third, training and familiarity. So with the trend shift from SAS to R, increased number of schools are teaching R over SAS. So recent graduates are more likely to be familiar with R than SAS. And pharmaceutical company is also investing heavily in R. However, there are some challenges with open source software. First is perception of quality. So some people consider open source software is more secure and stable than proprietary software because anyone can spot and rectify errors that might have missed by the original producer, publisher. However, other people think differently, and some of the people think security threats or potential vulnerability of open source software because there is a lack of controls and have some mistrust in the open source community. And third is validation. Second is validations. The reason why the FDA submission is mainly based on SAS because SAS is validated software. On the other hand, open source software are not always perceived to be validated. And next is support. So there is a huge R user community that can help you answering your questions and some of the challenges. However, there is no dedicated technical support, whereas other proprietary software have a dedicated support line with regular security updates. So the lack of formal support could be frustrating. And lastly, dealing with legacy code. So many companies have legacy code, which has been reused over and over and written using proprietary software. So ability to shift to different software might be limited, especially big pharma companies. So next slide, please. So I'm going to talk about my review experience of our Pilot 1 submission. So our consortium group submitted our base package to FDA on November 2021. And the objective was to test the concept that our language-based submission package can meet the needs and the expectation of the FDA reviewers, including assessing code review and analysis reproducibility. And in this pilot, we wanted to more focus on showcasing the feasibility of submitting our code. So analysis were very simple, and it was based on a clinical simulated data set. And evaluating FDA's acceptance of system or software validation evidence is not in the scope of this pilot. And as Ning said, all the documents and dataset codes are publicly available. Next slide, please. The main components of submissions were ADAM dataset, a PDF report with 4 analysis output, an analysis data reviewer's guide, or ADRG for short, and analysis output programs in R files, and sponsor developed our package in TXT file. And I just wanted to note that ideally in regular submissions, SDTM dataset, ADAM generation program, and ADAM dataset, all 3 are commonly submitted to FDA. But in this pilot, we only received the ADAM dataset, and it seems sufficient for this submission. And we may look into running an additional pilot in the future that provides more comprehensive package. Next slide, please. So this is the snapshot of the ADRG. So in this document, the sponsor clearly specify our version or package names, its version, and descriptions. And we asked them to provide clear instructions on how to execute analysis program in R. So they provided step-by-step procedures on how to install open source package and sponsor developed package. Next slide, please. So these are the 4 analysis outputs. So first table is summary of demographic and baseline characteristic. And there was 1 Kaplan-Meier plot. Next slide, please. And then the 2 tables were changed from baseline to certain weeks using ANCOVA models. So the group wanted to test wider use cases scenarios. So multiple open source packages were used to generate these tables and figures. Next slide, please. So our consortium used R version 4.1.0, but using R version 4.1.1, FDA was able to run the submitted code and confirm the submitted tables and figure. And using FDA developed code, FDA was able to independently generate the tables and figure using the submitted data. And there was no major issues with assessing code and reproducibility, but there are some minor issues. First was rounding issues. So when you compute the 95 confidence intervals, R has many different packages and ways you can choose. So R also gives flexibility to choose either approximate value over 1.96 or precise quantiles. So this inconsistency way to calculate the confidence level caused the minor discrepancies. And another things that we pointed out was each tables and figure should be standalone. This is not particularly applicable to this submission, but all other submissions. So some of the important information, such as specification of ANCOVA model, was not given in the tables. But each table and figure must be intelligible without referencing to any text or code. So these are the things that we followed with the group, and we completed the pilot 1. And we might find more potential issues in the futures, but one thing that we discussed was package dependency when analysis is getting complicated and use lots of R packages. So maybe submitting R package dependency chart might be useful in the review process. Next slide, please. So as a conclusion, we received electronic submission package in eCTD approved format, and we were able to install and load open source packages as well as sponsor developed R package using this submission. And we reproduced the analysis result, and we shared the potential improvements via written communications. So overall, the R-based pilot 1 submissions and review process went pretty smoothly. And I think it was possible because the R consortium group communicated with the FDA regularly and in advance regarding this submission. So my recommendation to sponsor is that please consult with the FDA review teams regarding the choice and suitability of statistical software packages at an early stage in the product development process. So it was a great pleasure to working with the R consortium group for pilot 1 review, and I look forward to reviewing the pilot 2 as well. So this concludes my presentations. Thank you for listening, and I will turn it over to Ning.
Thank you, Hee. So yeah, lastly, just want to say thank you for all the working group members. This couldn't be achieved without a strong collaboration with people. And I remember that many of the PRs or in like during midnight or like during weekends. So just really want to say a big thank you to people who are doing this on top of their day job. And also, as Hee mentioned, we're operating in public, so all the materials can be available found on our GitHub page, and including meeting minutes, meeting records, and etc. Yeah, so if you're interested, please check out our webpage. And if you want to join our monthly meetings, you can also email our consortium email address over there. So with that, thank you very much. That concludes our talk.